Hello again, peeps. I've had a couple of people mention to me that my handle as the lively astrologer is not something that they've sensed in the portrayal of recent astrological considerations. And I would wholeheartedly have to agree with them that the the signature or energy of what it is that currently is transpiring in the celestial conversations that we are invited to participate with has not had a light and flippant quality about it. Actually, far from it, because there are things afoot that contain a footprint that goes far beyond the day to day matrix of living experience that we are about. Uh, let's just take a quick look at the chart for this week. And right off the bat, maybe even before we dive too heartily into this particular chart signature that is at work, I was awakened this morning by dreamland. I never really know for sure just where dreams are going to unfold, but I'm being inclined, shall we say, in this particular dream consideration from this morning to vacate a a place where I was, uh, much to the disquieting of someone that was there saying, "Oh, you don't really need to go to that event, Jeff. Stay here, hang with me." And, the temptation was there. I guarantee you that. But something was pulling me to actually participate in this. I wasn't even sure what exactly it was to begin with, but I went, and I arrived. It seemed like it was, in a sense, at a college, university kind of setting, and I made it to the room where I was actually supposed to gather, actually where I was supposed to be. I sensed this is where I was supposed to be, and as I entered the room, it was the room was full. Well, and so I took the very last seat in the far back corner, the only seat that was left. And as I'm sitting down, a elderly gentleman comes up to me and indicates that, "Oh, I'm glad you made it today." And my impression was, and I don't know that I've ever actually seen a photograph of this person before, but this was Milton Friedman. And when I went to college, my major was in economics, and Milton Friedman is considered an authority figure on modern economics. And, to this scenario, I, of course, became curious, what is this about? And I got the indication from Milton that we were going to be looking at the economics of Jeff. for this particular course focus for the day. Oh, now there's a interesting twist on the day. By the way, the weekend was a twist in the fact that our power went out, along with thousands of others up here in the Northwest, because we had a windstorm that blew through, and I don't even know what the speed of the wind was, but it was ripping, and I think ripping is a good term for it. I have a tree that is split in my front yard right now, up about 8 to 10 feet, and leaning against another tree. It pulled off some of the roofing that was on the building that I live, but not so much so that there's going to be any leaks. But anyway, back to the story, the dream. And I'm ushered up to a seat a little closer to the front of the classroom, because this is going to be a valuation thing. Maybe I'm jumping a little ahead there. This is going to be a consideration of the economics of Jeff. So Milton, begins his spiel about looking at the fact that here is a man who, likely could have made much more of his life economically and be living a very contented and rich retirement experience. However, there were choices made along the way that curtailed, shall we say, that kind of potential. And he turns to me and says, why might this be the case, Jeff, that you didn't pursue the acquisition of the riches that life presents for each of us in this particular journey that you are on? To which I got a vision. A vision and a vision. Sure, why not? I'm in a different time and a different place. And I don't need to, I'm not going to spell out all the details of this, but I'm walking along, and it's a marketplace. And up ahead, I can see a couple of, kind of edgy folks bartering or trying to barter with the owner of this particular stand alongside the road for the skin of a tiger. And as I approach a little closer, I can hear them dickering back and forth. And, the people who wanted to buy that tiger skin were not willing to offer very much in the way of recompense for the store owner. And as I get close enough, the store owner turns to me and says, "What do you think this tiger skin is worth, Jeff?" And I sat with this for a moment, and I looked at the two people who were kind of gruff, attempting to procure this tiger skin. And the thought came to my mind, and I just said it right out loud. I think that the value that the original owner of this tiger skin had far surpasses what it is that you, who are trying to purchase it, might be willing to offer. I see the eyes open on the gruff pair, and they, and I see a twinkle in the eye of the store owner as they walk away, knowing that somehow they are not going to be able to procure this prized item. And I've offered this to the class. And this, you say, well, what does this have to do with the astrology of this week? Looking at this chart that I have right here in front of all of us, this axis between Scorpio and Taurus, astrologically, this is the axis of valuation. We have personal valuation, Taurus. We have group valuation, Scorpio, or shared valuation. And this, this is the main aspect for this week, is this total lunar eclipse, which you guys can see I have it set up for 3:02 in the morning, but it begins prior to that time. This is the actual epitomal moment when the sun and the moon are exactly opposite each other at 16 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio. So, one needs to keep in mind always when we're looking at eclipses that this is a cycle of the lunar solar dance. And when these two celestial characters are in the process of making statements to Earth inhabitants, what is on the table is always going to be, are you paying attention to the changes that are in the winds? We had a new moon a couple weeks ago in early Scorpio. Always, always, always a time of setting change in motion. Well, because this, and that was a solar eclipse, minor solar eclipse, not a total one. This is going to be a total lunar eclipse, which means the moon is going to pass between the Earth and the sun. And you can kind of see that this is very early in the morning here on the west coast where I live. So if you want to view this, with any luck, the weather will cooperate, and it looks like we're going to have cooperative weather here, though a bit on the chilly side, down around freezing temperatures, but real early in the morning. This is called a blood moon because this is, I don't know why it's because, it's more reddish, and it probably has a lot more to do with the proximity of the Earth orbit around the sun. We're moving into the further distances from that solar orb, and so this moon, which is on the far side of the planet from the sun, is getting its light through the corona area of the Earth atmosphere. And that's why it is red. And it happens at this particular time of year that the full moons are of that nature because of the distance from the sun that we are. Oh, I could go so many different directions from here. First off, and I read this 2 weeks ago when we were considering the solar eclipse. Each eclipse cycle, a Saros cycle, which lasts for 1,280 years, has a flavor that it represents, that is related to its initial astrological signature when the eclipses began. This is a south node Saros cycle. So that means that it began at the South Pole or near the South Pole and works its way, as Saros cycles do, up to the North Pole. And we're in that waning cycle of it right now, past the midpoint. But just the flavor of this particular Saros cycle is it's about being forceful and taking power. It has a manic flavor about it, with great force or strength manifesting in the relationship area. Individuals experiencing this Saros series may experience sudden events like falling in or out of love or sudden sexual encounters. The individual may also exert a huge effort in some group activity. Well, I find it kind of interesting that there was indication of the potential suddenness of some things transpiring, because if we were to look at this, we see that Uranus, right here, Uranus, planet of suddenness, things happening spontaneously that you hadn't foreseen, is right there in that same degree with the moon in the very center part of this eclipse process. So, other factors that I'm going to bring in is I would look at, I'm going to just sort of, since this is the main aspect that I'm going to focus on this week, let's consider the degree, the Sabian symbol for the degree where this particular moon is, 16 degrees of Taurus. And Taurus is comfort. It's our capacity to tune into the natural world. But the Sabian symbol for the degree where the moon and Uranus are sitting reads, a symbolical battle between swords and torches. And the keynote, refusing to depend upon the past, the seeker turns warrior, fighting anew the eternal great war. When Gautama, having sought in vain for the answers to his questions among the teachers of tradition, sat under the Bodhi tree, he had to fight his own battle in his own way, even though it is an eternal fight. The spiritual light within the greater soul must struggle against the ego will that only knows how to use the powers of this material and intellectual world. There is no possibility of escape. It is the energy that arises out of the present moment, the inescapable now, that the daring individual has to use in the struggle. In this second stage symbol, it is suggested that salvation is attained through the emergent individual's readiness to face all issues as if there were only two opposed sides. So teaches the Bhagavad Gita. This is the Dharma of this stage of human evolution, a stage of polarization of values. I find that just more than a little ironic, considering the particular energies that are in play here. Since this is a lunar eclipse, the sun is playing an important part. Yeah, it's a lunar eclipse, but without the sun, we would not have an eclipse. No, no, no. So, let's look at the degree where the sun is and see what the Sabian symbol there might indicate. A woman fecundated by her own spirit is great with child. That's the vision. The keynote, a total reliance upon the dictates of the God within. In contrast to the outgoing smile of the girl in the preceding symbol, that preceding symbol was a girl's face breaking into a smile. Doop, doop. Here we see the result of a deep and complete concentration reaching to the innermost center of the personality, where the living God acts as a fecundating power. This reveals the potency of the inward way, the surrender of the ego to a transcendent force which can create through the person vivid manifestations of the will of God. This second phase of the 46th fivefold sequence brings to us the realization of normally hidden potentialities in the average person being, in the average human being of our day. Faith in the divine is shown here being concretely justified. The human person becomes a mother of the living God. This is the transpersonal way of existence. It is the way that leads to creative mutations. Another factor that is basically in play, if you look at this chart, see this nice triangle that we have here? These are squares from the axis, which is the polar connection that's creating this eclipse, this lunar eclipse, the opposition between the sun and the moon, which is not just the sun and the moon. Nothing was ever that simple. The square to Saturn, the great teacher, the progenitor of life lessons. This is Saturn's function. It's often Saturn's perspective to present a challenge that says, you want to do this. Have you considered the costs of doing what it is that you think is most important? I would be drawn back to the story of the tiger skin. Wherein is that value? And who is making the determination? But that Saturn factor, it's in play. Even though it's, a couple of degrees away from it. Darn close enough to have an what shall we call it, an impinging factor on the flavor of just how this total lunar eclipse might be facilitated in playing out at the level of all kinds of values. What would the Sabian symbol from Dane Rudger's astrological mandala have to say that Saturn energetically might throw into this mix? The Sabian symbol reads, "A forest fire is being subdued by the use of water, chemicals, and sheer muscular energy." The keynote, the skill and courage necessary to bring under control the destructive potential of carelessness, of karmic visitations. I'm not going to read any more of the write-up that Dane Rudger presented at that point, but let us contemplate the footprint of the value factor that is in play in this eclipse season. You know, here in the United States, this just happens to be the day of our midterm elections, the 8th of November. There are versions of value in play that are being spun from, as the Sabian symbols speak, from polarized versions of what is attempting to be attained through the election process. And, you know, my own take in it is, does that in reality carry the level of merit for a longer footprint that is at work currently for humanity? What are the karmic ramifications for what it is that our modern society is foisting upon the natural world? Remember, Taurus, our connection to the natural world. This eclipse season, this lunar eclipse, is right there in the middle of Taurus. It's being tickled by Uranus, retrograding back toward it. As with any election, there are pundits who try to prognosticate or predetermine in some, what shall we call it, mystical way, who is going to, or what program, what posture is going to come out on top. Whereas my sensing is that there is no real top in a polarized version of potential. There are only edginess factors at work trying to one up each other and not see the potential for wholeness that is right there on the periphery, asking us, is what it is that I stand for, that you stand for, going to bring us together more? Or is it going to foment more angst, more edginess, more hate thoughts from one side to the other? Because if so, then I think we need to go back to the drawing board and vote on something that has a much longer footprint. That warlike stance, posture that is being taken by only a few is disrupting our capacities to see and appreciate one another in rather unique fashion. There's only so much earth to go around. And we, in our modern surge forward, have attempted to set a parameter that has as its bottom line ownership. But the ownership at the material level, which seems to be percolating always very near the top of the pile of human versions of the meaning of life, I suspect barely scratches the surface of what it means for us to live a soul level of awareness. That's a longer footprint. That one life cycle, one earth walk moment barely makes a dent in. Oh, it can seem like a profound dent. But does it enhance, or how many aspects of the living experience are enhanced or will be enhanced by your participation in this material plane of existence? Milton, were the lines of demand and supply cross, what is it that is being supplied and what is it that is being demanded? Yes, at a material level, you can arbitrarily come up with that X marks the spot. But at an energetic level, do you sense that there might be something more than just this material dance that we have been taught and trained into from our earliest Western educational processes to see as the bottom line? So how much is that tiger skin really worth? And you, do I have enough appreciation for its original owner? Let's dance this chart ahead a little bit to the time when I normally do it, which is about 8 in the morning. Do our days, and let's take a gander, a real quick gander. Oh, even before I do that, one other factor that's in play that I almost forgot was that here's Mercury at the time of the lunar eclipse. Actually, this is a couple days later. Actually, no, this is the same day. Just a couple of hours later. Mercury here, 16 degrees 12 minutes. Sun at 16 degrees 13 minutes. This is known as Cassimi, when a planet is in the heart of the sun. And the sun rules Leo. It also has this connection to the heart. And when a planet is Cassimi or conjunct the sun, the king, sun can be seen as king. The king provides a willingness for that planetary energy to actually have the opportunity to sit on the king's throne. And while there is given permission by the king to say things, open up the levels of, in this case, it's like Mercury, how we communicate, how we put things together in a format that is meaningful to us. This communication tool is sitting on the throne of the king, and so has the king's ears. So Milton, in my dream, as theoretical king, proxy king at best, he asked the question, what is it that drove me to not, tackle the economic accumulation story to such an extent that I too could be the rich man and control this, that, and the other thing? And just at that moment, the picture that dances through my mind is a galloping tiger in all of its strength, muscle, sinew, a vision looking out across the plains or through the jungle of, life alive in the moment, and wondering, of what value is it to have things if, in having them, we curtail their further use or utility? I think of the 3 potential levels of astrology. You have the primary level, your natal chart. This sets up a pattern that you chose to incarnate into that says you are going to do this, that, and the other thing in this fashion. Then we have the secondary level of astrological consideration, the progression, the secondary progressions, which is an unfolding of the energetic signature that one grows into as you proceed through life, which alters that initial package or initial natal chart in perhaps subtle, but not always that subtle, a way of being able to grow and glean awareness from what it is that initial awakening experience invited your soul into as an adventure for this life dance. And of course, there's the tertiary progressions, the third one, which has a lot, works a lot more of the consideration. I'm not going to go into that right now. I just want to do the primary and secondary consideration. Each moment of life, something is born. What we're talking about here is the birthing of this lunar cycle that, in a way you could say it culminates in this total lunar eclipse. But that's just one step along the way. And it's a birthing process. And we're in the season of Scorpio. We're still in it. We're right in the middle of it, actually. So I've already talked quite particularly about the vitality that tuning into appropriate approach to going through the letting go process that should be required in order to get to the rebirthing process. How important is that? I think it's pretty darn important, because you can go into the challenges or the challenging experience of trying to facilitate a clearing experience where you are going to be able to be rebirthed anew. And depending on how effectively you've been able to release the constraints that history seems to have placed upon you, or you have placed upon yourself through time, to this point where the focus shifts. We're going into the second part of the Scorpio season, and it's an eclipse season, so it changes on the table. And to get to that point where we can focus on being reborn as a new being, no longer constrained by the issues of the past that either we invited or we found ourselves too involved within to extricate ourselves from. We're being given an opportunity right now to let go. And if you want to be reborn as a new being, not just a reshuffled version of who you used to be or may want to be, the value of your capacity to release the old handholds that seem to be reaching out to hold you back from the rebirthing process are going to be challenging. I didn't say they wouldn't be. But how willing are you, am I, to see options that I hadn't seen before because my vision was clouded by an educational process that tried to contain opportunity that existed well beyond just this material level of existence. Anyway, that Mercury being right there on the sun for this lunar eclipse has something to say. Might your thoughts be tweaked a little more than normal? Are you able to listen and actually hear those often subtle, quiet voices, sounds of life beckoning for you, for me, to tune in more particularly to what it is and what it means to be a soul. Earth plane, earth dance. This is a school where we're given opportunity to pay attention to factors that, are material, but not just material. I think of, getting back to value, is things can have a primary value. What's the secondary value? Is something that you have done in the primary value level going to be able to be reutilized later on again? Perhaps for a different purpose. But that secondary level, are the things that you do going to actually carry substance that will grow? Or is it just the one-use type product of a natural resource that once it's done, poof, that was it? And I think that Milton version of supply and demand needs to have that perspective included. Is there a secondary use for the materials involved in anything? Or is it just the throwaway society idea? Not minor considerations. Are the things that you do, are the things that I do, they carry the merit of looking out just a little bit further into the future unfoldment of what lies ahead? Is my trajectory able to sustain a longer footprint? Is yours? Well, we're having a hard time getting to any of the rest of this week. There is one redeeming value that will transpire beyond today, and this is something that the moon is going to make this week. It won't be until 13th, Sunday. And it's brief, but there are, you can kind of see this trine that's developing here between the Neptune-Jupiter conjunction and these planets moving through Scorpio, because Venus, you can kind of see here, is Thursday, is trining Neptune. Mercury is zipped past the sun, as Mercury is often wont to do. And so the trine that I'm talking about is a water trine that the moon is going to complete when it gets to the sign of Capricorn. Here we go. Cancer. And here it is, Sunday. It makes a trine between the sun, Neptune, and the moon, a water trine. Scorpio is a water sign. The potential for attunement in the water triplicity that our current Scorpio version is tickling has a version of intuition that can work and develop between us as, or I should say, only if we can reach a level of honesty with ourselves that we can share with others and not attempt, in often a Scorpio fashion, to hide away from others. Then the process of shared valuations that Scorpio represents is going to go a lot further in the development of the attunement process, which is a process of healing that is available, or more readily available, when we can be honest with ourselves and invite others into that same kind of opportunity, whereby, we aren't trying to live at a pretense level, but actually are open to the current energies that are in the flow of what our life is going through. And from there, this is the shared valuation process at work. Others in that field of openness that the shared process can grow may have a perspective on any kind of illness factors that may be nibbling at your peripheral parts, or maybe even your actual parts. The insight that openness brings may be just the healing implement required to open you up to the process of rebirthing, being reborn, which is, it's whole. There's a wholeness factor there that is health. That's what health is. It is wholeness. While, we're going to have maladies going through life, it's just the natural part of being alive. this image that I chose for today, the reason I chose it is because life is like this web, this matrix. And, you could say that a lot of these globules of water on this spider web, these are like us as individuals. And often we lose track of the fact that there are connective lines of energy existing between us and between all of us that, run through one another, sometimes in seemingly distorted way, this person over here and this person over here. You flow. I have to go through these three people and then over to this person and to this person and then down to this person and then over and across and yet there is a level of connection always there. And what is the implement that is sitting here in this image that we often overlook? It's the water element. The water element is a level of connection that we have to everything as the recognition of our participation one with another at a vibrational level that we were not taught as part of the living matrix that we are and always have been, always will be a part of. That's probably enough talking for this particular day. Enjoy the lunar eclipse tomorrow. And I trust that when a lot of us have already voted, but when the results, however long it takes for this particular election process to be revealed to us, have a care for the larger picture of what life is about. And don't get too hung up on the matrix of division so evident in the play of the political system that seems to have grabbed a hold of us all. There is much more dynamics at work than just that. And we're at the precipice right now of the invention, fabrication, if you will, of a new story, a new mythos to live by as we go forward that will bring us more together than what politically currently seems to be on the table. I leave you with an aloha. That is love. Is that the missing ingredient? It's part of it. Ciao for now. And do some thinking. Mercury, Cassini the sun. Good time to really do some thinking at a Scorpio sense, a deep level. None of the surfacey stuff. Where is your value? What is of value in the long run? Ciao.